प्रजहाति यदा कामान् सर्वान् पार्थ मनोगतान् आत्मन्येवात्मना तुष्टः स्थितप्रज्ञास्तदोच्यते यदा हि नेन्द्रियेत्तेषु न कर्मसु अनुसज्जते सर्वसंकल्पसन्न्यासी योगारूढस्तदोच्यते. We have seen the characteristics of a sthita prajna, the jnani who is rooted in the knowledge of one's true nature and thereby is self-poised, equanimous, and has complete mastery over his mind. And a yoga rudha, further adding on to a sthita prajna, Krishna introduced the principle of vairagya, of detachment. One who ceases to be attached to all sense objects and to all actions and is completely devoid of all kinds of longing, all kind of hankerings, cravings. And now we will see Krishna's answer to Arjuna's question on who is a Gunathita. Our objective was to understand how Krishna developed the principle of sthita prajnatva and yoga rudhatva and connect it with Gunathita. And we will see how all of this eventually gets connected to Krishna's exposition on the greatest bhakta, the jnani. After having explained the nature of the gunas, the cause for bondage, the effects of the gunas and how the gunas bind the Atman in the cycle of samsara, Arjuna is now interested to know all about Gunathita. And this is where we paused in the 14th chapter and went back to look at sthita prajna and yoga rudha. Arjuna asks Krishna, "Hey Krishna, kairlingai strin gunanetan atito bhavati prabho kimacharah katam chaitam strin gunan ativartate." Gunathita, atita, one who has gone beyond the three gunas. One who has conquered the three gunas, one who has transcended the three gunas. Now, what does it mean? As long as one lives, the Atman is embodied in the body, and the body is made of three gunas. So, transcending three gunas means transcending the influence of the three gunas. Now, to understand this, I was thinking of presenting some kind of a mathematical model. Now, all of us, all human beings, can be presented in a very simplistic form, let's say in a mathematical model. Now, if you were to look at three concentric circles in a horizontal plane, this is still two-dimensional. The three concentric circulars being, there is an outer circle, which represent the surface, which represents the body, the inner circle, the mind, and the innermost circle, the center, is the Atman. Most often, we are always at the periphery our awareness is always rooted at the periphery. We are completely unaware of the center. The center being the core, our Atman. All of us, when we take birth somewhere off the center. We take somewhere off the center with awareness of physical, maybe for some even mental awareness of having a body and a mind. There are many for whom even the body and the mind is one. For many, the distinction to know, to discriminate that the body is different, the mind is different, and within the mind the intellect is different, and eventually the Atman, the center, is different, that awareness completely is lacking. And so therefore, one who takes birth, his awareness is rooted somewhere off the center. The greater the distance from the center, greater one is materially inclined, materially oriented. Now, this is where we need to go back and recap two concepts that we learned when we were children in physics. The centrifugal force and the centripetal force. Just for all of us to make it easy, once again I have here an illustration of what is a centrifugal force. A centrifugal force is when an object has a movement taking a curved path, keeps going away from the center. The direction of the movement, while it goes in a curved path going around the center, but it keeps going away and away from the center. Whereas a centripetal force is exactly the opposite. This is the illustration here of centripetal, where the any body which is subject to a centripetal force takes a curved path and keeps moving in a curved path towards the center. Now, why do I bring these two concepts here? As long as one is attached to the body, as long as one is body conscious, as long as one is a gunabandhi, one who is bound by the gunas, one who has mistaken identity that he is the body, the gunas have a force which is centrifugal in nature. The center being the Atman, here the gunas take one's awareness away from the Atman and keeps it moving away externally to where one loses touch with one's own true nature. One leads one's life in complete lack of awareness, ignorance of one's own true nature. This is where comes the sadhana that Gita teaches us. When we looked at Asthita Prajna, the sadhana taught, which is we have to apply a centripetal force to ensure that the movement of our consciousness is not centrifugal, not subject to the force of gunas, but the movement is towards the center. The movement is centripetal in nature. And and the sadhana can be summarized as Indriya Nigraha, Mano Nigraha, Nididhyasana, Upasana. Indriya Nigraha at the first level is not just control of the senses, but mastery of senses. This is like building a fence around. This is Indriya Nigraha. It's like a VIP having multiple layers of security. So Indriya Nigraha is mastery of the sense organs, not just control of sense organs, mastery of sense organs, where the incoming stimuli from the external world is fenced, is stopped, is filtered. every stimuli that comes into the mind is filtered, and I exercise my willpower to filter out what comes in and what stays out. Indriya Nigraha. Mano Nigraha is the next level of security. Now, in spite of the efforts expended to filter out what comes in and what stays out, still there are stimuli that reach the mind. Now, Mano Nigraha is all about exercising willpower as to which thoughts do I entertain and which I don't entertain. Waves in the ocean do not happen accidentally. It all starts as small ripples, and every ripple, with the aid of a wind, becomes a wave, and with the aid of mighty wind, huge waves turn out to become tsunamis. So Mano Nigraha is to ensure that a ripple does not turn out to become a tsunami, or a wave or a tsunami. Only when one practices Indriya Nigraha, Mano Nigraha and Nididhyasana, and then Nididhyasana can be followed when the mind is peaceful, contemplation, which can then blossom into Upasana, Bhakti of Bhagavan. Now this force, this sadhana is centripetal in nature, bringing our consciousness, our awareness towards our core. Now the question that we can then ask is, the journey, is it only centripetal? Is it only two-dimensional? Which means, is it only at this level of this movement coming all the way towards the center? Now what about, this is horizontal growth, one can call it. Now what is vertical growth? There also has to be vertical growth. Now if we were to make it three-dimensional, and if we say, you add the z-axis to the x and y, which is in the two-dimensional plane, now the vertical growth that happens, will it be cylindrical or will it be conical? Now the Gita clearly says it cannot be cylindrical, it has to be conical. It is something like this. So which is, as the journey, so as Indriya Nigraha, Mano Nigraha, Nididhyasana happens, with the centripetal nature of the movement, the surface is still needed, the body is still needed, the body does not disappear. Therefore the surface is still there, but the radius keeps shrinking. Why? Because the consciousness is moving towards the inner core, and as this movement happens, as the radius of the circular base keeps shrinking, Upasana adds the vertical growth, and the vertical growth is where the Atman is also traveling towards the Paramatma. Therefore, sadhana, which is essentially in steps of Indriya Nigraha, Mano Nigraha, Upasana and Nididhyasana, is eventually the movement of the consciousness, of the awareness, even with the body, even when the body is there, when the Atman is embodied, has both horizontal growth and vertical growth. And a Gunathita is one who is actually on this path. Transcending gunas is shifting the consciousness, the awareness from the periphery to the core. And this shift of this consciousness from the periphery of the core, when I say periphery, the outermost periphery is the body. And the next layer is the mind, and eventually the periphery has to shift towards the core of the Atman. And a Gunathita is one who traverses on this surface of this three-dimensional cone, making both horizontal growth and vertical growth. Horizontal growth, where getting closer and closer to the realization of his own Atman. Vertical growth, getting closer and closer to the Paramatman. So therefore Atmajnana, Bhagavad-jnana, both helping the journey take shift the consciousness away from the periphery towards the center, where the reference, life's reference, becomes the center and not the periphery. So this is a difference between a gunabandhi and a gunathita. A gunabandhi lives rooted in the periphery. A gunabandhi cannot discriminate between his true nature. He misidentifies with his body made of the three gunas, misidentifies with his mind made of three gunas, and therefore his consciousness is always at the periphery, and many a time this radius between the center and the periphery keeps even increasing because of the force of the gunas. And when he gets the direction right through the sadhana, a gunathita achieves he conquers the gunas. He transcends the influence of the gunas and traverses both horizontally and vertically, where even when he is embodied, he is able to transcend the influence of the gunas. So this is how we can understand the journey of a gunathita, how to make the journey of the gunathita possible. Arjuna has a very interesting question. He says, Kairlingai strin gunanetan atitan bhavati prabho. Linga means sign, symbol. What are the signs of a gunathita? This is exactly the similar question he asked earlier. How do I identify a sthita prajna? How do I know one is a sthita prajna? What are the signs of a sthita prajna? Similarly, he is asking here, what are the signs of a gunathita? One who has transcended the influence of the gunas, transcending the influence of tamas. Transcending the influence of tamas is transcending the influence of ajnana, which means one who has acquired jnana, one who has conquered pramada, alasya, nidra, one who has conquered laziness, one who has conquered carelessness, one who has conquered daydreaming, one who has transcending the influence of rajas, one who has conquered restlessness, one who is at peace with himself, one who is active and at the same time can also enjoy peace. This is the seeming, he has reconciled the seemingly contradictory things, activity and peace. He is reconciled the two, and both can be possible at the same time. So he has transcended the influence of rajas. He has transcended the influence of sattva. How does he transcend the influence of sattva? Sattva binds one to the experiences of joy and pleasure. We saw how it is important not to fall in love with the light that has shown us the path. When we are in darkness and we need to reach home, it is very important to have a torchlight. And with the torchlight, the light can then show us the path. But it doesn't help if we fall in love with the light that has shown us the path. It is important, instead of just falling in love with the light, we need to take the path and reach home. Similarly, sattva is so very important. It is like the light that shows us the path. But no point in falling in love with that light. So, transcends that attachment to jnana, transcends that attachment to pleasure, which are the results of sattva. Now, a gunathita, for sure, is sattvic in nature. This is where we need to also have clarity. When we say one is sattvic, a sattvic person also is subject to the forces of rajas and tamas. We have seen earlier in this chapter that everyone is subjected to all the three forces of sattva, rajas and tamas. It is the question of what is predominant. And we have also seen, even in highly sattvic people, there are times when rajas and tamas dominate. So therefore, no living entity can completely escape all these three forces. So a gunathita is a sattvic person who knows that, who has transcended the attachment to happiness and jnana that have resulted out of sattva. So this is where we need to have clarity that sattva is important. A sattvic person is a Gunathita with no attachment to the influence of sattva. Now Arjuna here is asking for the signs of such a sattvic person, a signs of that person who has conquered the effects of three gunas. Kairlingais trin gunan atito bhavati prabho kimacharaha. Achara, how does he conduct his life? How does he behave? Katham chaitam strin gunan ativartate. And he also asked this question: how can one transcendence is easy to understand, but how to transcend? How can one go above, beyond the influence of these three gunas? That these are the three questions that Arjuna answers, and Krishna starts to give the answers to these three questions. This is the concluding part of the 14th chapter. And Krishna answers. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha. Prakasham cha pravrittim cha mohameva cha pandava nadveshti sampravrittani navnivrittani kankshati. Nadveshti sampravrittani nanivrittani kankshati. Krishna says, even in a sattvic person, there are times when rajas rules, rajas is predominant. And there are times when tamas could be predominant. Even a sattvic person has to sleep, so tamas has to be there. And sometimes when due to ill health, there can be some mental delusion also in a highly sattvic person. Now, what is important here to understand is Krishna is talking about the signs of a Gunathita. Prakasham cha pravrittim cha mohaeva cha pandava nadveshti sampravrittani nanvrittani kankshati. Prakasha, pravrittihi, moha. These are the three primary influences of sattva, rajas and tamas. Prakasha, illumination, the primary influence of sattva. Pravrittihi, activity, the primary influence of rajas. Moha, delusion, the primary influence of tamas. Now he says, when there is prakasha, there is no hatred. When there is no prakasha, there is no craving. When there is activity, there is no hatred. When there is no activity, there is no craving. When there is delusion, there is no hatred. When there is no delusion, there is no craving. These are the signs of a Gunathita. A Gunabandhi is one who has strong likes and dislikes. Is always after Ishta Prapti, Anishta Nivritti. He always wants to have what he loves, does not want to have what he doesn't love. He always wants what is agreeable, he does not want what is disagreeable. Whereas for a Gunathita, there are no such ifs and buts. There is nothing which is agreeable, there is nothing which is disagreeable. This is the primary difference between a Gunabandhi and a Gunathita. Prakasham cha pravrittim cha mohaeva cha pandava. Prakasha, when there is illumination, when there is clarity, a Gunathita knows that is his natural state. When there is no clarity, when there is no light of illumination, that happens even to a highly sattvic people. When one is sick, when one is not doing well, one may be ruled by tamas, one may be ruled by rajas, and one may not be able to have the same level of clarity when one is in a normal state. But then there is no craving even at that stage, because why? The Gunathita understands that these are passing clouds. The passing clouds for a Gunathita is not going to come in the way of his vision of the sun, which is always present and radiant all the time. Similarly, pravrittihi, when there is activity, when actions need to be performed, a Gunathita understands that they have to be performed action for the sake of action, not for the sake of fulfillment of a desire, a selfish desire. When there is no action need to be performed, when one needs to be in a state of calm and peace, one also is not having a craving to act. When action here is also includes physical and mental. Moha, delusion. When there is delusion, when there are momentary delusions. Why? We can ask this question. Does a Gunathita also has past delusions? Yes. Because tamas is not 0%. Tamas, it could be single digits. There will be times when tamas can be dominant. And there could be those momentary phases of delusion. But a Gunathita is able to understand the situation and stay calm and let that situation pass. And similarly, when there is no delusion, there is no craving, because he knows he is always at his natural state. Now, what is here clearly Krishna is talking about? How a Gunathita is able to manage his thoughts, his feelings and his emotions. Thought, feeling and emotions, his mental processes, the result of these mental processes, which are his bodily feelings, which are in the domain of his senses, the stimuli that are experienced by the senses, which are the feelings, and the emotions, which are nothing but reactions of the mind to various stimuli. Now, at the level of the thought, a Gunathita is very clear. Thinking is natural. But a Gunathita is one who thinks about his thinking. A Gunathita is one who thinks about his thinking, which is essentially he is able to identify that he is not his thoughts. He is able to identify the direction his thoughts are taking. Are they going in the right direction? He is able to identify the right thoughts and the wrong thoughts. By identifying these thoughts, he is also able to bring in distance between himself and the thoughts. Age of social distancing, here this is distancing, mental distancing, bringing a distance between one's true nature and his thoughts. So thinking about thinking, when this happens, one is able to manage one's thoughts, and when one is able to not identify with one's thoughts, thoughts can come and go. There are no resentments, there are no guilts, and one is not carried away by one's thoughts. One knows that a moment of illumination and is not carried away by it. At the same time, a moment of no illumination, he is not perturbed at all. So that is at the thought level. Second, a Gunathita understands that I am not my feelings. Why? He clearly understands that the feelings belong to the domain of the sense organs. And sense organs are part of the instrument that I use for my life's journey, but I am not my feelings. Again, the problem comes that we are ruled by our feelings only when we are identified with our feelings. Now, if we have to manage our feelings, as long as we are dependent on our feelings for our own gratification, it is impossible to misidentify with the feelings. Therefore, a Gunathita is one who understands that he is not dependent on his feelings for his gratification, because he is not dependent on bodily gratifications. So a Gunathita at the level of feelings is very clear. I am not my feelings. At the level of one's emotions, a Gunathita also understands that emotions do not belong to him. Emotions come and go. It is like when we are on the road, there are street hawkers, street sellers who keep coming and selling their stuff. Now, if we completely ignore them and they go, then we are not under their control. But imagine we start giving specific attention to one particular hawker. That particular hawker is encouraged to to become louder, and after a period of time we get hooked and we end up buying something. Emotions are like these hawkers, these various who keep coming in and going in our mind. Now the point to understand here is we may not be able to control our emotions, but we can control the attention we give to our emotions, because many a times emotions can be triggered unconsciously. We may not be able, sometimes we don't even know that there is an emotion that gets triggered without us consciously triggering it. But then the question is, do we attend to it or we don't attend to it? We may not be able to control our emotions, but we can definitely control the attention we give to our emotions. Just like how if we don't give attention to a street hawker, his loudness is not going to increase and we are not going to get hooked to him. Similarly, if we don't give attention to unwanted emotions, those emotions will slowly die without really impacting us. So a Gunathita at all three levels, thoughts, feelings and emotions, clearly understands that there is a distance between him and his thoughts. There is a distance between him and his feelings. There is a distance between him and his emotions, and he can manage all three of them. And that is the reason why natveshti na kankshati. There is nothing which is agreeable, there is nothing which is disagreeable, because anyway none of this belong to him in any manner, because he understands clearly that he is at the center. His awareness is rooted at the center, not at the periphery. He is not journeying at the periphery, he is actually journeying towards the center. Again going back, we need to visualize a Gunathita who is journeying and on the surface of a three-dimensional cone. Both there is horizontal growth and there is vertical growth. Still at this point we are still looking at horizontal growth, journeying at a greater speed, overcoming the forces of three gunas, journeying towards the center, which is understanding, realization of one's own true nature. Then Krishna goes on in the next shloka and he says, Udasina vadadasinaha gunairno na vichalyate gunavattanta ityeva yovatishtati nengate. Now this is to the second, the achara of Gunathita. The first were the signs of a Gunathita. Now Krishna is talking about how does he conduct his life? How does he behave? What are his achara? Kimacharaha? Arjuna asked. So Krishna is answering that question. Udasina vad asinaha. One who is always, who remains unconcerned. One who remains unconcerned here is not apathy. Unconcerned here is one who is neutral. Udasina vad asinaha. Gunairyo na vichalyate. And he goes on to gunavartanta ityeva yo vatishtati nengate. So he is firmly established at the center. He is always rooted at the center, which is rooted in the realization of his true nature. And therefore, Raingate is unwavering in all situations. Now, Udasina vadasinaha gunairyona vichalyate. He is not perturbed. He is not disturbed. Gunas, he knows that the sense organs are the product of the gunas, the sense objects are the product of the gunas, and it is quite natural that these gunas interact with the gunas, which is what is creating all the effects. And therefore he knows that the three gunas keep triggering various kinds of desires, various kinds of anger, and therefore he knows that they do not belong to him. That is, therefore he remains as an observer. Observing. It's like, on the cricket field, the fielders vociferously keep appealing all the time, but the umpire needs to be neutral. It is not the intensity of the appeal of a fielder that really matters to the umpire. It is actually the merit of the appeal that really matters to an umpire. Similarly, the three gunas keep triggering various kinds of desires, Therefore, each of them start to appeal vociferously, vehemently. Now one needs to be an observer, a witness, neutral to all of them, and decide what is the right appeal and what is the wrong appeal. So Gunathita here, Udasinavadasinah Gunairyona Vichalyate, like an umpire in a cricket field, the Gunathita, he looks at all the appeals of the emotions and he chooses the right kind of emotion that is appropriate. Also, it is very important here when Krishna says, one remains firm and steady, unwavering, established, rooted in one's own awareness of one's own true nature. It is to understand that the mind, by design, when the way it functions, there is disturbance in the mind is inevitable, keeps happening. The three gunas that are always present, even in the most sattvic person, there are rajasic and tamasic vasanas that keep triggering many a times thoughts. Now many a times we experience this. We ourselves sometimes, we cannot accept this when a very wrong thought gets triggered. It is very important to understand that what is inside me is not really me. Many a times, guilt, resentment, various negative feelings arise because we sometimes have no control over what gets triggered because of our own vasanas. So therefore it is important. A Gunathita understands that what is it? Just because something is inside my mind, it is not me. We don't need to be perturbed with something, even if it is filthy, which is there in the mind, as long as we don't identify with it. As long as we realize that it is not me. It is like the mind, we can take the analogy, the mind as a mental hospital. Now in the mental hospital, there are all kinds of people with various mental illness. And each of them get triggered. Sometimes the triggers may not be traceable. And different kinds of these people with different kinds of mental illnesses behave differently. So each of our desire prompted thoughts in the mind are like each of these people with different kinds of mental illnesses. But it is important to understand that even in a mental hospital, there is order. There is no chaos. Because why? There are medical staff to deal with these various kinds of people with various kinds of mental illnesses. Therefore, by design, because of the dominance of the three gunas at various points, at various times, the mind will be subject to disturbances. But a Gunathita understands that these disturbances come and go. And what is important is to establish a semblance of order all the time by attending to these disturbances immediately, by ensuring that the disturbances do not grow and create panic within the mind, does not create disharmony within the mind, does not create disorder within the mind. So in spite of these influences of Rajas and Tamas, a Gunathita understands that he uses Sattva to attend to these minor disorders, minor disturbances, to ensure that he remains at peace, his mind remains in order all the time. That is why Krishna says, a Gunathita, he says, Gunavattanta ityeva yovatishtati nengate. He is firmly rooted at the center of his being. He is firmly rooted. His awareness is always at the center, realizing his own true nature, realizing that Gunavattanta, gunas interact with gunas. It is not my business. I am an observer. I am a witness. I am not my body. The body is just an instrument that I need to do this, to traverse in this life's journey. And therefore, he is firmly established in this knowledge, firmly established in this awareness, and he is unwavering, and he is not perturbed by the influences of these three gunas. And then Krishna goes on to further explain the way the Gunathita leads his life. In the next shloka he says, Samadukka sukha swastaha samaloshtasma kanchanaha tulya priya priyo dhiraha tulya nindatma apstutihi samstutihi. Samadukka sukha swastaha. Swastha, one who is established in oneself. Purnatva, one who is complete by himself. Sama dukkha sukha. Dukkha sukha. Pleasure, pain. To be alike, to be equipoised in both pain and pleasure. To be both pain and pleasure being equal, which means one has a higher purpose in life. The problem comes only when we are pursuing pleasures and avoiding pains. A gunabandhi is always, his life's mission is to pursue pleasures and avoid pains. If that, then one cannot be equipoised amidst sukha and dukkha. But if one knows that beyond pleasure and pain there is something higher, one knows the higher purpose of life, then one can be equipoised. Samadukka sukha swastaha. Swastaha, to be established. Atmanyeva atmana tushtaha. Sthita prajnas tadochyate. One who is established in oneself. Purnatva, completeness of one's own being. Now, when one knows that one does not need anything, one has everything. Because why? One knows his one true nature of completeness. It's like somebody has $100 billion. For such a person, if he is offered 10,000 rupees or 1,000 rupees or 1 rupee, it makes no difference. One having $100 billion doesn't care for 1 rupee, 1,000 rupee or 10,000 rupees. So therefore, similarly, a Gunathita is one. Sama loshtashma kanchanaha. Loshta, a clay of mud. Clay, clay, ashma, stone, or gold, a piece of gold. A piece of clay, a piece of stone, or a piece of gold is the same. Makes no difference to him because he is beyond all of this. Tulya priya apriya dhiraha. He is equal to both priya apriya. Dhiraha. Who is a dhira? One who can discriminate between the body and the Atman. Tulya nindatma samstutihi. Tulya ninda. When there is samstuti, when stuti is praise, ninda is censure. Gunathita knows that he cannot shut the mouth of a critic, but he can shut his mind, so that the words of the critic need not fill his mind. So he is not perturbed. He is not influenced by both praise or ignominy. Words of praise or words of censure or ignominy does not bother him at all. Why? Because he is ever situated. His awareness is always situated at the center, and as I started saying before, he is traversing on this conical pyramid. And Krishna goes on, continues that discussion, and he says, Manapamanayos tulyaha tulyo murari pakshayoho sarvarambha parityagi gunathita sauchyate. A very interesting shloka, which is actually leading into eventually the dimension of bhakti. But before that, Krishna makes a very important statements here in terms of how a Gunathita conducts his life. Mana apamanayoho tulyaha. Tulyaha, to be alike. Mana apamana, honor, dishonor. One Gunathita is one who is alike in honor and dishonor, he says. it is important to understand that what is agreeable to the mind immediately triggers joy. What is disagreeable to the mind immediately triggers sorrow. To a Gunathita, he understands what is agreeable and disagreeable are products of the three gunas. And therefore, he is beyond what is agreeable and disagreeable, and therefore he is beyond honor and dishonor. Now, we all, for our own fulfillment, are dependent on external factors, dependent on people. Now, even to do good, the fulfillment that comes out of doing good, the key here is to ask the question, what is good? Many a times we define it as what is praised by others is good. The key here is to understand it is not what is praised by others is good, but what is good according to the Shastras. So therefore, when we say honor, honor is disrespect coming from external factors. Apamana, disrespect, dishonor coming from external factors. Therefore, a Gunathita is one who derives his fulfillment within, who has inner fulfillment doing good, and he is therefore not influenced, not dependent on mana, apamana. That is why Krishna says, mana apamanayoho tulyaha. Honor and dishonor, mana and apamana, are the makings of the mind. It is what the mind tries to tell us. It is mind's commentary to us. If you have to take this analogy, what if in cricket, the batsmen who are playing also start listening to the commentary as the game is progressing? When a batsman, let's say the team is in bad state and the batsman is doing a great job in terms of recovery and playing a wonderful knock. But what if the commentator is describing this as a fluke, describing this as something and not giving credit to the batsman? And if the commentary is constantly being listened by the batsman himself, what kind of an impact that would happen on the batsman's performance? So it is like the same is when we start listening to the mind's commentary about life. The focus should be on life and not on mind's commentary on life. And what if it is not one commentator, but multiple commentators giving their own comments constantly, and the players are listening to this commentary? And what if it is a huge panel? Imagine, it's like a panel on Republic TV, Arnab Goswami leading the commentary and the debate on every shot that the batsman plays. And the nation wants to know why the batsman, instead of hitting a six, defended the ball. This is not going to help the batsman do his job. So therefore, mana, apamana are mind's commentary. And a Gunathita is focused on his life, not on the commentary given by mind about his life. One more thing we also need to understand here. Why a Gunathita can actually treat both mana and apamana alike. It is not easy. Why it is not easy is because most often we imagine ourselves playing the role of either a hero or a villain in somebody else's life drama, and that is where that is the product of this imagination is mana or apamana. We all have our life dramas. But what is important to understand, that we overestimate the role that we play in somebody else's life drama. At best, maybe we are jokers in their life's drama, or most often we are extras not even jokers. Now, once we understand this, then we are not governed by the approval or disapproval of somebody. We do not need to give space to worldly people in our minds. And similarly, we do not need to expect space in somebody else's mind for us. Gunathita, therefore, is one who can easily treat both mana and apamana alike. Tulya mitrari pakshayoho. Again, mitra ari, friend and foe, friend and enemy, treating them alike. Now, this should not be misunderstood as treating a friend as an enemy and enemy as a friend. That would be foolish. Obviously, there is a value of friendship. In fact, love for a friend is fundamental to cultivate selflessness. Therefore, what Krishna here is saying when he says Tulya mitrari pakshayoh is my attitude towards the other person should not be influenced by his or her attitude. Love, compassion for all, irrespective of who they are and what they are. Pandavas and Kauravas were enemies, hated each other. And of course, Pandavas had all the reason for hating Kauravas. And of course, Krishna encourages Arjuna to fight against Kauravas. Now, we can ask this question, is it not contradictory with the statement Krishna is making here? Krishna is saying treating friends and foes alike. So why is he encouraging Arjuna to fight against Kauravas? Krishna himself gives the answer. Mat karma krin mat paramaha mad bhakta sangavarjitah nirvairas sarvabhuteshu yasamameti Pandava, he says. Hey Arjuna, fight against the Kauravas, but not out of hatred for the Kauravas. Fight against the Kauravas not as a means for revenge. Fight for the sake of Dharma. Fight for the sake of working for me. Fight as a service to Bhagavan. So therefore, Krishna is categorical here that a Gunathita is one who has compassion and love and who is not swayed by, his attitude is not swayed by a friend or a foe. Sarvarambha parithyagi. Arambha, any work which has a selfish motive is arambha. Sarvarambha parityagi. Sarvarambha parityagi. One who renounces all kinds of selfish actions. Which means his actions, a Gunathita's actions are not anymore driven by any kind of selfishness. If the mind is fast, the intellect has to be faster. And we also looked at the example of an analogy as the mind being a child, which has to be, and the mother being the intellect, which has to be watchful all the time to ensure that the mind does not engage in wrongdoing and correction happens at the right time. But the mother also sometimes can be negligent and miss out to be watchful. The intellect, which is supposed to be watchful of the mind, can also get corrupted, and this corruption happens with selfishness. When there is selfishness, the intellect also gets corrupted and cannot be watchful of the mind, and that is when one engages in all kinds of wrongdoings. But luckily, there is another part of the intellect which can correct the corrupted intellect. And this is why Krishna here says a Gunathita is one who uses his intellect, the correcting part of the intellect, to correct the corrupted part, which is by Sarvarambha parityagi, by practicing renunciation of all selfish desires, engaging in work only for the sake of a higher cause, only for the sake of a higher purpose. Sarvarambha parityagi Gunathita savuchyate. So now Krishna has covered all the key characteristics of a Gunathita, and they more or less map. We have reflected on the characteristics of a Sthita Prajna. We have reflected on the characteristics of a Yoga Rudha. And we have seen that the characteristics that Krishna has highlighted so far maps with those characteristics of a Sthita Prajna and Yoga Rudha. Now, Arjuna had 3 questions. Kairlingai strin gunan etan atito bhavati prabho. What are the signs, the linga, the signs of a Gunathita? How do I recognize? By looking at one. Then he also wanted to know kimacharaha, how a Gunathita conducts his life. Katam cha etan atitan. How, the third part is, how does a Gunathita transcend the gunas? That is the third part. He also wanted to know. He not only wanted to know the characteristics, he also wanted to know, yes, Krishna, it's very clear that by transcending the 3 gunas, the Gunathita leads leads a life rooted in total detachment. But how does one transcend the 3 gunas? That was his third question. And this is where Krishna leads into the concluding part of the Gunathita and gives an answer as to how he can transcend, how he can go beyond the force of the 3 gunas. And Krishna gives the answer categorically. He says, Mam chayo vyabhicharena bhakti yogena sevate sagunan samatityetan brahma bhuyaya kalpate. So this is where Krishna is now connecting the dots of a Sthita Prajna, a Yoga Rudha, with a Jnani, which is covered in detail in the second Shadka, the 7th chapter, 8th chapter, 9th chapter, 10th and 11th. And he connects the dots here, and with one shloka he gives the answer as to how, because all of us have had this question when we were looking at the characteristics of Sthita Prajna, when we were looking at the characteristics of a Yoga Rudha, when we were looking at the characteristics of the Gunathita. This underlying question was always there. Yes, we understand that the journey has to be centripetal. We understand that in order to journey towards the center, one needs to overcome the force. One needs to overcome the forces of the 3 gunas, which is centrifugal in nature, taking us away and away from the center. How to transcend these 3 gunas? And Krishna beautifully in the shloka gives us the answer. He says, Mam cha yaha avyabhicharena bhakti yogena sevate. The one who practices bhakti yogena sevate, loving devotional service. Avyabhicharena. This is the key word here. Avyabhicharena. In order to develop longing for Krishna, it is important to realize that we belong to him. To long for Krishna truly can only happen when we have total awareness that we belong to him. Avyabhicharena, such a wonderful word. Unswerving bhakti. Connected to Krishna, unswerving, steadfast connection, in the total realization that I belong to him, I am his property, and there is no other business for me other than loving service to him. That is why Krishna here qualifies bhakti yoga, avyabhicharena, bhakti yogena sevate. Now, here Krishna answers this question in terms of how the forces of the 3 gunas can be overcome. Here Krishna says, when one starts to practice bhakti yoga, the focus shifts from emotions to actions. The problem that we have is most often our actions are controlled by our emotions. We are controlled by our emotions, and therefore our actions are also controlled by emotions. And our emotions are controlled by the three gunas. Now, emotions can be compared to the weather. Weather keeps changing and we have no control. We have no control how the nature of the weather, to have any control on the weather. The weather keeps changing and we need to accept the changes that keep happening in the weather. Similarly, emotions keep changing. Depending on the three gunas, the dominance of the three gunas, the emotions can keep changing. We may not be able to control the emotions, but we can definitely ensure that the emotions don't control us. Similar to how, if the weather gets cold and the temperature drops dramatically, we can still go out and do work by wearing warm clothes. Similarly, changing emotions does not necessarily mean that we cannot control our actions. This is where Bhakti Yoga comes in. This is where service comes in. This is shifting emotions to actions. Now, if the emotions are constantly changing because of the three gunas, the one who practices bhakti clearly has a higher purpose. He's clearly connected to Krishna, or at least tries to keep connected to Krishna, understands the higher purpose, and therefore that higher purpose would help one to bring the focus back on the work, which is service to Krishna. So Krishna, that is why Krishna clearly answers, how do I start overcoming the force? How do I ensure that the centripetal force that is needed to move towards the center, both horizontally and also starting to travel vertically as well? That is only possible when the fuel of bhakti is added. Also, the mind needs an anchor, and Krishna is that anchor. Krishna is not only the anchor for the mind to attach to, Krishna is also the anchor by which the mind can attach. Just like how a boat, when it is in stormy seas, needs an anchor to stabilize, the mind, which is always subject to the storms of kama, krodha, lobha, moha, mada, matsaryas, needs an anchor. Now, anchor can mean two things. Anchor is also the object to which one attaches. Anchor is also a verb. The process of attaching to anchor to the object. In the case of Krishna, he is both the object and the means. He is the destination and he is the expressway. When our mind starts to attach to Krishna, anchor our mind to Krishna, Krishna is just not a passive object. That is why he is not only the anchor, the object, but he is also the anchor, the verb. Because the moment we start to attempt to connect to him by anchoring Krishna in our mind, he also ensures he is actively involved with us in this process. He is not a passive object. The moment the mind has Krishna as our object, he also gets involved in the process and accelerates this process and strengthens the connection that we can make. The anchoring gets strengthened. So that is the reason why here Krishna, in answering to Arjuna's question as to how do I transcend the three gunas, and he also here says, Bhakti yogena sevate. Seva, serving. Here Bhagavan and Bhagavatas also come in very important. That is why the process here involves commitment to building a relationship. Bhakti here is, we need to understand that is the process. Just like how when we have to build a relationship with somebody, we all know that today, we all know that if we have to develop a relationship with anybody, we need to invest, we need to commit to building that relationship. The same applies to Krishna. Commitment to build that relationship. Commitment in terms of time and effort. Commitment in terms of attention. Commitment in terms of priority. And when that commitment is strengthened with Shraddha, with conviction, then the acceleration of this journey towards the center happens. This the centripetal force gains more momentum. We ourselves experience this. Many people come to satsang for various reasons when they start off. Some could be because of a gentle push by a spouse. Initially, it requires some amount of effort. It requires our mental states, our mental moods can vary. We all think we need an inspiration to practice bhakti. Even to pray sometimes, we think we need an external inspiration many a times. In our own day-to-day lives, we are all waiting for that inspiration to happen. If we need to study the Shastra, if we need to worship Krishna, if our mental moods can keep changing, when there is tamas overpowering us, we are lazy. When there is rajas, we are so active, we are trying to do different things, and because of the mental states constantly keep changing, we try to find an excuse that when there is sattva in me, maybe that is the time I will possibly get inspired to engage with Krishna, in building a relationship with him, in performing bhakti through various means. That does not happen that way. Krishna is very categorical here. Irrespective of the mental states, one needs to put that commitment to building that relationship, and it is an iterative process, and over a period of time, as bhakti starts to strengthen, it is a team effort here. What is the team effort? The team effort here, in terms of moving towards the center, in terms of transcending the gunas, is first I need to identify the interplay of the three gunas. First, I need to understand that whatever is happening, all the activities are all influenced by the three gunas. And then I need to identify the influence of tamas, the influence of rajas, the influence of sattva. Then I start looking at how do I team myself with sattva. So it becomes from 1 versus 3 to 2 versus 2. So I team up with sattva and I fight against rajas and tamas. And then Krishna now says, that alone is not enough. This has to be a cooperative conquest of the gunas. What is the cooperative conquest here? I do not need to work in isolation. I am not lonely here. Krishna is waiting for me to team up with him. So therefore, Bhakti Yoga is teaming up with Krishna and fighting against the force of the three gunas. And when the teaming up with Krishna happens, the fight becomes effortless for us. The journey towards the center, horizontally and vertically, which is again visualizing the journey across the surface of a pyramid. That journey becomes accelerated, so becomes effortless, because now it is not only guided by Krishna, he starts to pull us. The pull, bhakti, the fuel, also ensures that the journey is no more a push, it is a pull, where Krishna is the one who starts to pull us, and from a state where we require tremendous effort, we reach a state where it becomes totally effortless, because Krishna completely takes over in not only steering the journey but also in ensuring that the pull also happens. That is why here Krishna answers this question to Arjuna in terms of how do I transcend? Mam chayo avyabhicharena bhakti yogena sevate, and says sagunan samatityetan brahma bhuyaya kalpate. Sagunan saha, such a person. Gunan samati etan, he transcends, goes beyond all the three gunas. The gunas of tamas, rajas and sattva. Brahma bhuyaya kalpate. He reaches a state where he qualifies to reach a state which is the state of Brahman like, which is apakhatapapma, vijaraha, vimurtyuho, vishokaha, vijigitsaha, abhibhasaha, satyakamaha, satyasankalpaha. The 8 gunas, kalyana gunas, of reaching a state, one has reached a state where one is not only rooted in the knowledge of one's true nature, he is rooted in the knowledge of one's nature, the nature of Bhagavan and one's relationship, and that teaming up with Krishna enables one to constantly stay rooted in the center. Otherwise, the force of the gunas, as long as this body prevails, there is this force of guna always acting and always trying to pull one away from the center, and we need a greater force. We need to hold on to a greater power to ensure that we stay rooted at the center. And this is what Krishna does to his bhakta. And that is why he says it is very important. That is why he clearly concludes the section on Gunathita, and he says, unless and until bhakti becomes the fuel in this journey, one can practice control of senses. One can practice regulation of all the senses. One can try to bring balance in one's life. One can renounce likes and dislikes. One can practice all kinds of yogas. But to reach a state of complete detachment, to constantly stay rooted in the awareness of our true nature, we need the fuel of bhakti, which is the only source for energy on this journey. And this source of energy is unlimited, because this source of energy is coming from the unlimited source of Krishna. And when one is endowed with this source of energy, the journey becomes the journey becomes beautiful, the journey becomes so enjoyable, and the journey becomes effortless. And that is how one transcends the influence of the three gunas and leads one's life in a state of total detachment, in a state where the mind is equipoised, where one can stay as a witness, witnessing the interplay of three gunas and knowing that this is part of the process of life's journey and focuses on the higher purpose of life's journey. Everything else becomes lesser priority. And one leads a life. This Gunathita then understands that the only purpose of this life's journey is to fulfill his life's mission of attaining Krishna. Bhaktya tvananyaya shakyah ahamevam vidorjuna yatum drashtum cha tattvena praveshtum cha parantapa. Knowing him, seeing him, and attaining him. There is no other business in this life. There is no other purpose in this life. Everything that needs to be done has to be around these three processes: knowing, seeing, and attaining Bhagavan. That becomes the priority, and everything else falls within this. And this Gunathita is able to fashion his life and lifestyle in such a way that while living in this world, he has not packed his bags and he has not become an ascetic. He has not packed his bag and he has walked away from society. He continues to lead his life. He continues to lead his life, but continues to stay rooted in that awareness, knowing his higher purpose and accomplishing his mission of knowing, seeing and attaining Bhagavan. Sarvam Sri Krishnarpanamastu.